I never planned to fall for someone twice my age, especially not my best friend's mom. But sometimes, distraction feels a lot like destiny. It was supposed to be an ordinary lecture, one of those long, late-morning classes where the sunlight cuts through half-open blinds and dust hangs in the air like tiny golden secrets. My professor's voice drifted somewhere in the background, steady but distant, like a radio I wasn't really tuned into. I was there, sitting in the third row, but my mind was somewhere else entirely. My phone buzzed again. Once. Then again. A quiet vibration against the desk, small enough that no one else noticed, except me. My heart gave that tiny, guilty jump it had been giving a lot lately. I didn't even have to check the screen to know who it was. Her. I could almost see her name glowing behind the black glass. The professor suddenly stopped talking. His shadow fell across my desk. "Mr. Amir," he said, his tone half amused, half warning. "You look like you're attending a completely different class today." A few students laughed softly. I smiled back, embarrassed, pretending to scribble something in my notebook. But inside, my thoughts were tangled somewhere between her last message, "How's your day going?" and the memory of the first time she ever texted me. It had started so casually. She'd gotten my number through her son, my friend. I'd helped him with an assignment, and she'd wanted to thank me. Her message had been polite, almost formal. "Appreciate your help with Ali's project. You've got a real teacher's patience." I'd replied with something simple, "Glad to help, ma'am." But somehow, those small words had turned into longer conversations. A question about university turned into a late-night exchange about favorite books, and before I knew it, her texts had become part of my days. A quiet constant, something I looked forward to more than I should. Now, sitting there in that classroom, I could still feel the echo of her words from last night. "You remind me of who I used to be, before everything got complicated." My professor's voice came back into focus for a second. "Amir, would you like to share your thoughts on the reading?" I blinked. The words in the textbook blurred. The class chuckled again as I fumbled for an answer. I mumbled something vague, enough to pass. He moved on. But I knew he was right. I was distracted. Not by games, or boredom, or sleep. By something, someone, who shouldn't have meant this much. When the bell finally rang, I packed my things slowly, careful not to look at my phone until the room had emptied. And when I finally unlocked it, there it was, a new message. "You seemed quiet last night. Everything okay?" I could almost hear her voice reading it. Soft, careful, the kind of voice that listens even when it shouldn't. And for a moment, standing there in the fading noise of the class, I smiled to myself, realizing that my professor was right. I wasn't distracted. I was completely, hopelessly captivated. It was Saturday afternoon when she texted again, this time asking if I could stop by to look at her son's old laptop. "It's not turning on," she wrote, adding a small smile emoji that somehow made the simple request feel personal. I told myself it was nothing, just helping out, something any friend would do. But as I walked to her house, carrying my backpack and pretending not to feel nervous, a part of me already knew this wasn't just another favor. The street was quiet, lined with neem trees swaying lazily in the warm wind. Her house stood near the end, the kind that looked lived in, with soft curtains and potted plants that had clearly been cared for. When she opened the door, she smiled in that effortless, composed way that always seemed to calm me and unsettle me at the same time. "You're a lifesaver," she said, stepping aside to let me in. Her voice, gentle, low, like it carried a touch of fatigue and grace at once, filled the silence of the hallway. The laptop sat on the kitchen table, surrounded by the faint smell of brewed tea and vanilla-scented candles. I set my bag down and began working while she busied herself with the kettle. "So," she said, glancing over her shoulder, "how's university treating you? Still getting scolded for daydreaming?" I laughed a little too quickly. "You heard about that?" "Ali mentioned it," she said with a small smile. "Said you got caught staring at your phone again." I felt my cheeks warm. "Guilty," she chuckled, the sound soft and genuine. "Must be someone special." I didn't answer. The laptop chimed to life, and I focused on the screen as if it demanded all my attention. But my hands were trembling, not from nerves, exactly, but from how aware I suddenly was of everything around me. The clink of her spoon against the cup, the faint hum of the ceiling fan, the way she leaned slightly on the counter, looking at me like she was seeing past all the polite boundaries we both pretended to keep. When she brought the tea over, Her fingers brushed mine, just lightly, just enough to make my breath catch. She didn't pull back right away. Her eyes lingered for a heartbeat, soft and unreadable. "Thank you," she said quietly. "You're very kind, you know that?" I nodded, unsure what to say. Words felt too small for the weight of that moment. We sat there for a while, sipping tea, talking about everything and nothing. Her garden, my classes, the kind of music that made us both nostalgic. The air between us shifted, not louder, but closer. When I finally stood to leave, she walked me to the door. "Text me when you reach," she said, her tone casual, but her eyes held something unspoken, a warmth that lingered even after I stepped out into the evening light. And as I walked away, the scent of her tea still on my hands, I realized something quietly terrifying. I didn't just enjoy her company. I needed it. It started innocently enough, like most dangerous things do. A few messages here and there. A photo of her garden in the early morning light, dew still clinging to the roses. A picture of her coffee cup beside a half-finished novel. And then, one night, a simple message. "You still awake?" That was the beginning of everything. It was almost midnight. My dorm room was dim except for the yellow glow of my desk lamp. The campus outside had gone quiet, just the hum of distant traffic and the soft rustle of trees against the window. I stared at her message for a moment before replying. "Yeah. Couldn't sleep." "You." A moment later, 3 dots appeared, then vanished, then came back. "Same." Sometimes the silence feels too heavy. I didn't know what to say at first, but her words sat there on the screen, raw and real in a way that most people never let you see. We started talking, not about her son, not about classes or small favors, but about life. About what it feels like to grow older and realize some dreams quietly slipped away. About how people stop asking how you really are. About loneliness that doesn't announce itself, it just settles in. She told me about her nights, how she'd make tea and sit by the window, listening to the city murmur far away. I told her about my fears, of wasting time, of chasing things that didn't matter. Somewhere between those messages, something changed. Her replies became softer, slower, like she was choosing every word carefully. Mine became longer, more honest. I remember one night she wrote, "You remind me of a piece I forgot I could feel." I stared at that line for a long time. I didn't know if she meant it the way it sounded, or if I just wanted her to. The hours blurred. Midnight turned into 1, then 2. We talked about music, the old songs her husband used to play, the ones that still made her heart ache. I sent her a song in return, one that reminded me of her calm voice and the way she'd look away whenever I caught her smiling too long. She replied, "You shouldn't know songs like this at your age." I typed back. Maybe I was waiting for someone to send them to. No answer for a minute. Then finally, "You're dangerous, you know that?" I laughed quietly, staring at the screen like a fool. My heart felt full and weightless at once. Outside, the sky began to pale. She said she should sleep, but I could tell she didn't want to end the conversation any more than I did. Her final message read, "Good night, Amir. Don't let the world make you colder." I didn't reply right away. I just sat there in the stillness, letting her words settle over me like a blanket. Because in that moment, I realized this wasn't just texting anymore. It was something far more dangerous. Something I couldn't name, but couldn't stop, either. It happened one rainy afternoon, the kind of day that makes the world slow down. The sky was heavy, the air smelled of wet soil, and every drop that hit the window felt like a heartbeat I couldn't ignore. She had texted earlier, "If you're free today, could you drop by? Ollie left one of your books here." It was a simple reason. Too simple, maybe. Still, I found myself standing outside her door half an hour later, pretending that I was just there for the book. When she opened the door, the scent of rain mixed with something warmer, cardamom, maybe, or the faint sweetness of her perfume. She was wearing a soft gray sweater, sleeves rolled up, hair loosely tied. There was something unguarded about her that afternoon. Not polished, not perfect, just real. "Come in," she said with a smile that barely reached her eyes. "You must be drenched." I stepped inside. The house was quiet, too quiet. The kind of silence that made every small sound feel amplified. The kettle whistled softly in the kitchen. A single lamp cast golden light across the room. "Ollie's out with friends," she said casually, almost like an apology. "But you can wait. I was just making tea." I nodded, though I already knew I wasn't here for Ollie. We stood side by side in the kitchen, the distance between us shrinking with every small movement. She poured the tea slowly, hands steady but her breath just a little uneven. The steam rose between us like a veil. "Sugar?" she asked. "Just a little." She reached past me to grab the bowl. Her shoulder brushed my arm. Soft, brief, electric. It wasn't deliberate, but it wasn't exactly accidental either. My pulse stumbled. She looked up, and for a split second, our eyes met, and neither of us looked away. There was no music, no words, no confession. Just a quiet understanding that whatever this was, it had already crossed the line between friendship and something else. We sat at the table afterward, pretending to talk about ordinary things, the weather, her garden, the university festival coming up. But every pause felt loaded, every silence stretched a little longer than it should. At one point, I noticed her fingers trembling slightly as she lifted her cup. I wanted to reach across and steady her hand, but I didn't. I couldn't. When I finally stood to leave, she walked me to the door, the soft sound of rain filling the space between us. "Thanks for stopping by," she said, her voice gentle, but her eyes saying something she couldn't. As I stepped outside, she called after me, "Amir?" I turned. She hesitated, then smiled faintly. "Don't catch a cold." I smiled back. "I'll try not to." The door closed slowly behind me, but her warmth stayed. In the smell of rain, the touch of her sleeve against my arm, the echo of something unspoken. And as I walked away, heart unsteady, I knew I wouldn't forget that moment. Because it wasn't the tea, or the talk, or even the touch. It was the silence, and everything it confessed for us. The days after that visit were quieter, not in the world around me, but inside me. I kept telling myself it had just been tea. Just a casual afternoon. Just nothing. But every time my phone lit up with her name, my pulse betrayed me. For a while, she didn't text much either. Our conversations, once effortless, became shorter. Polite. Careful. Like two people standing at the edge of something neither dared to name. Then one evening, just as the sun began to sink behind the rooftops, she messaged, "Are you home?" I replied yes. "Can we talk?" My heart skipped. 15 minutes later, I was outside her house again. She opened the door before I could even knock properly. Her face looked softer than usual, tired, maybe, or burdened by something she'd been carrying too long. She gestured for me to come in. We sat on the couch, a small distance between us, as if space itself had become fragile. The sound of a clock ticking filled the silence finally. She said quietly, "What's been happening between us? I don't know how to explain it." I didn't interrupt. I just listened. She looked down at her hands, twisting a ring on her finger. "You're so young, Amir. You have your whole life ahead of you. And me." Her voice caught for a moment. "I've already lived most of mine. This shouldn't mean anything. But it does." I could hear the tremor in her words, a mixture of guilt, fear, and longing all tangled together. "It does," I said softly. "At least to me." She looked up then, her eyes searching mine, like she was hoping I'd give her a reason to stop, and terrified that I might not. "I think about you more than I should," she whispered. "And every time, I tell myself it's wrong, that I should stop. But then you message, or you smile, or you say something kind, and it feels impossible." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The room seemed smaller somehow, the air thicker, the distance shorter. Then, almost without thinking, I reached out and placed my hand over hers. Her fingers were cold, tense at first, then slowly softened under my touch. "I don't care about what's right or wrong," I said quietly. "I care about what's real." Her breath hitched. She didn't pull her hand away, but she didn't meet my eyes either. "You don't understand," she said. "People would talk. Ollie would never forgive me. And you deserve someone who isn't complicated." "I don't want simple," I murmured. "I just want you to be honest with me." She finally looked at me then, eyes glistening, voice barely above a whisper. "I'm scared, Amir." "I know," I said. "So am I." We sat there like that, hand in hand, no words left, just two people caught between fear and something that felt dangerously close to love. And when I left that night, I didn't know if what had happened was a beginning or the beginning of goodbye. The next few days felt like walking through fog. Everything looked familiar, yet distant. Her silence stretched longer than usual. No messages, no calls, just an empty space where our words used to live. I tried to focus on university, assignments, classes, conversations with friends, but none of it filled the ache. Every time my phone buzzed, I hoped it was her. Every time it wasn't, I told myself it was better this way. Maybe she'd realized what we both had refused to admit, that feelings like ours didn't fit neatly into the world. Then, one afternoon, as I was leaving the library, I saw her. She stood near the campus gate, a faint smile curving her lips, hands clasped together like she was afraid I might walk right past her. For a second, I thought I was imagining it. But then she waved. Just once. Small, hesitant, real. I walked over slowly, heart pounding. "I hope I'm not intruding," she said, her voice soft but steady. "You could never intrude," I replied, unable to hide the warmth in my tone. We started walking without deciding to. The world seemed quieter around us. The soft rustle of leaves, the hum of distant traffic, the kind of silence that invites truth. "I've been thinking," she said after a moment, "about that night. About what I said." "So have I." She looked up at me, her eyes filled with something like relief. "I didn't stop texting because I stopped caring, Amir. I stopped because I cared too much." Her honesty hit like a wave, gentle, but impossible to ignore. "I know," I said quietly. "I felt it too." We walked in silence for a few more steps before she spoke again. "Do you ever feel like the world wouldn't understand something that feels completely natural to you?" "All the time," I said. "Especially now." She smiled faintly, her gaze distant. "When I was your age, I used to think love had to follow rules, timing, age, what people think. But the older I get, the more I realize it's just about connection. And I haven't felt this kind of connection in a long time." Her words lingered in the cool air between us. We reached the park across from the university. The wind played with her scarf, catching strands of her hair and carrying the faint scent of jasmine toward me. She laughed softly as she tried to fix it, and in that moment, everything, the distance, the hesitation, the guilt, just fell away. Without thinking, I reached out and held the edge of her scarf to keep it from flying. Our hands brushed, warm skin against cold fingers, and she didn't move away. "I missed this," she whispered. "Me too." It wasn't a declaration. It wasn't even a promise. It was simply the truth. Two people admitting that whatever this was, they didn't want to lose it. And for the first time, the silence between us didn't feel wrong. It felt like understanding. Life slipped back into its rhythm, but something between us had quietly changed. The messages returned, not as often as before, not as restless, gentler, steadier. A "good morning" here, a photo of her garden there. Each one felt less like a secret and more like a note left in the open, a simple reminder that we were still part of each other's days. When we met now, it wasn't in hiding. Sometimes it was a quick hello after class when she came to drop something for Ollie, other times a brief coffee on weekends. The unspoken tension that used to hum between us had softened into something warmer, not weaker, just calmer. One evening we found ourselves at our usual cafe. It had become our quiet place, tucked in the corner of a narrow street, always smelling faintly of roasted beans and rain. The same corner table waited, 2 cups, 1 sugar bowl, and the same low hum of music floating through the air. She looked different that night, peaceful, lighter somehow. "I used to think happiness meant fireworks," she said, stirring her tea slowly. "But maybe it's just sitting across from someone who makes silence feel safe." I smiled. "You make it easy to stay quiet." She laughed softly, the kind of laugh that feels like a secret between two people who've learned each other's rhythms. "You're still too young to be saying things like that," she teased. "Maybe I just learned from the right person," I said. For a moment, she reached across the table and brushed her fingers over my wrist. Light, barely there, but enough to make the world pause. Her touch wasn't filled with longing now. It carried gratitude, calmness, and something deeper, acceptance. "Whatever this is," she said quietly, "thank you for it. For listening. For reminding me that I can still feel alive without breaking anything." I nodded, understanding exactly what she meant. The world outside still wouldn't understand. But maybe it didn't have to. We finished our tea in easy silence. When we stepped outside, the air was cool, the sky brushed with early evening color. She walked beside me, not ahead, not behind, just next to me, as if we'd finally found the right distance. As we reached the corner, she stopped. "You should go, before your professor catches you being distracted again." I smiled. "He's right, you know." "About what?" "I am distracted," I said, meeting her eyes. "Just in the best possible way." Her laugh was soft, almost shy. Then she reached up, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear as she whispered, "Take care of yourself, Amir." I watched her walk away. Calm steps, confident shoulders, the soft sway of someone who'd made peace with her heart. When I returned to campus the next morning, the professor cracked another joke about my wandering attention. The class laughed. I smiled, too, because for the first time, I wasn't restless. Some distractions don't fade. They just become part of who you are. And she was that, a quiet chapter in my life that would always feel like home. Here's how you can add a call to action, CTA, that fits perfectly with the slow burn, emotional tone of your story, something that keeps the audience immersed and gently encourages engagement without breaking the atmosphere. Below is your final section, after part 7, with a smooth transition into the CTA. Clapperboard closing narration plus call to action, soft background music fades, gentle piano or acoustic strings. Narrator, softly. Sometimes love doesn't arrive with promises or fireworks. Sometimes it just leaves you quieter, wiser, and grateful for the way someone once looked at you and saw a version of yourself you'd forgotten. Maybe that's all real connection ever is. Not about possession, not about perfection, just presence. Pause. Music swells slightly. Narrator, warm tone. If this story touched your heart, even a little, take a second to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps me tell more stories like this, about quiet love, impossible timing, and the kind of emotions we rarely say out loud. Gentle outro fade. Narrator, final line, soft smile and voice. Thank you for listening. And remember, sometimes the smallest distractions change everything.